Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. This is Season 8, Episode 17. I'm really honored to have had the chance to talk to Emmanuel Laroche, who is the Vice President of Marketing and Consumer Insights with the company Symrise North America. This is a company that's a flavor manufacturer. You may not have heard of them, but you definitely have encountered their products. If you've eaten food, if you've fed your pets food, if you've um, encountered flavor in any context, it's likely that you've encountered a Symrise product. Now, he also, in addition to this, has a podcast called Flavors Unknown, which is a wonderful podcast where he talks to chefs, food writers, people in all aspects of food production. And it's really a fantastic podcast. And it's one of my favorites. And it's one of the ones that I listen to every week. I think that and Radio Cherry Bomb are my two favorites that I hit up first every week, just as a kind of constant. And also I want to mention that he has out now a book called Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door. This is a collection of his dialogues with award-winning chefs from various backgrounds. Now, I want to tell you right off the bat that I know you're probably immediately thinking, oh, it's a kind of plug and play, a bunch of stuff that he did, et cetera, that we've seen so often in food writing. Not at all. Not at all. This is a big difference. This is a wonderful work where he tackles topics and he talks to authors and chefs and people in food production. It's kind of almost like a roundtable kind of effect in getting their different various POVs on topics, chapter by chapter. It also encounters his work doing the interviews almost as like a travel log. It's kind of like a road movie, and then that he's traveling the country, talking to different people, and taking the sense of kind of the nation in this regard. It's a very unusual and very unique book, and I really recommend it. Please don't, just don't write this off as just, a bunch of essays, etc. It's a really good book that has some really very serious topics in it, and I wholeheartedly recommend it. I was blown away by it. You're going to be blown away by it too. Emmanuel's just a wonderful, just humble man who I enjoyed talking to. Just his work is so great, and I really got to tell you, you got to listen to the podcast, Flavors Unknown, and you got to get the book Behind the Kitchen Door. Without any more of that, I'm going to go ahead and take you right to the podcast so you can listen to the words of Emmanuel Laroche. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian Podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I'm very honored to have on the podcast Emmanuel Laroche, who is Vice President of Marketing and Consumer Insights for Symrise North America, the flavor manufacturer. He is a podcast host of Flavors Unknown, where he talks with chefs and other people in the food industry about their creative passion in the world of food. His new book, Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door, is Emmanuel Laroche's collection of dialogues with award-winning chefs from various backgrounds and cultures, sharing their personal experience of where and why food culture is where it is today. Emmanuel, thank you for being on the podcast.
Dean, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Now, I was reading your bio and I saw that you lived as a child and young adult in France, and you later traveled throughout Europe before moving your family to the United States. What brought you to the United States after living in Europe?
I guess, yeah, you read that in my bio, and now that you heard my voice, you can tell that
Yeah.
I had a childhood in France.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I was born in France, and now I'm both, in fact, American and French. I've been 20 years now here in the US. It happened that when I finished my studies long time ago in France, I did a Master of Organic Chemistry and then an MBA with a focus on marketing. And I wanted to improve my, practice of and speaking of English, because it was really my level was at the level of school. So, it not very high, and it was important for business. So I had the chance with the company that I did my internship at, that they sent me a year in the US. It was back in, should I say, 1998. So I spent the whole year in Wisconsin, where in fact the company that I was doing the internship at that time had an affiliate, and I fell in love with the country. That was my first contact ever with the United States, and I was 25 years old, and yeah, I loved everything about it. I travel, all around, and I said to myself, like the pace of the business, and maybe one day I'll come back. So that's what in fact, that I worked on. Well, I had to go back to France after my year, and I had the chance to work for a lot of countries in Europe, based out of France. And always in the back of my mind, I wanted to go back, professionally, to work in the US. And the opportunity came about 2002.
Yeah.
There was, the company I work for today that merged with another company. And they asked if I wanted to create the marketing team out of New Jersey. And I was on the plane. So yeah, so I was supposed to stay here for a few years, as an expat, and I
Yeah.
decided to stay with my family, and it's been 20 years now.
Nice. Now, I'm very eager to talk to you about the company you work for because I
Mhm.
looked at the website and it just got me so excited because it's a very exciting website and a very exciting company. So you are Vice President of Marketing and Consumer Insights at Symrise North America, a company that is a flavor manufacturer. How did you begin work in this field and what led you to work for this company?
So, good question. In fact, I fell in love with the space of flavors right at the time of what I was mentioning to you. That internship that I did
Yeah.
after my MBA. It was in that field already. It was in the flavor industry. I was living at that time in the south of France, near Nice, and there is a town there called Grasse, Grasse, which is really specialized into fragrance and flavors. And I got that internship there, not knowing anything about this industry. And I fell in love with it. I think I really annoyed my friends and family during that summer, talking about extracts and bringing some samples, and experimenting in the kitchen of my mom, at that time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I fell in love with it. It was it was about food, and I do love food. And it was connected as well with my background of chemistry, because when it comes to flavors, even if it's natural flavors and extracts, with things come from nature, the structure are, of course, chemical structures. So for me, it was a connection directly with my background of my studies, and as well with my passion for food.
Now, the company makes more than food, as I understand it. The average consumer interacts with your products 20 to 30 times a day. And I never really thought about that. But it after I started looking at the website, I'm like, wow, I really get this now. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, this is obviously, a marketing statement, but it is totally true, because that company, Symrise, has like different divisions. So we have the fragrance division. So we, of course, work with fragrance manufacturers, so fine fragrance. So if you wear colognes or fine fragrance, so we might be with you. If you are using household products like cleaning and detergents, and all of that, hair freshener, we are in those products. But we have this food and beverage division, where in fact there is as well pet food. So if you have a nice companion, as a cat or a dog, we are supplying ingredients there as well. And then obviously, when it comes to flavors and natural ingredients that goes into food, we work with a lot of food service company and as well retail companies. So we could be in a shelf of lot of products that you consume at home, and as well in restaurants, and chains that you might go to and enjoy some meals. So we are with you like 24/7.
I was reading a book on French baking recently, and I noticed that the flavor profiles are much larger than we have here traditionally in America. I know I grew up largely with your options for flavoring were largely vanilla
Mm-hmm. And
and
vanilla.
vanilla. And that was really it. And I was reading her book, and there's like lavender,
Sure.
coffee, rum, um, almond, of
Mm-hmm.
course, vanilla, and then so many other. I mean, that's just like not,
Citrus,
yeah.
orange.
Oh yeah.
spices. You put, of course, here cinnamon, but you can have nutmegs and so on. So yeah,
And but so
very
were
rich.
you influenced for that with your interest in flavors?
Yeah, I mean, this is, the world of flavors is really touched like every category of food and beverages. So you're talking about baking, but it's in culinary as well. It is in snack. It's when you buy, a snack, a chips, for instance, and
Yeah.
then we are, as a flavor company or a seasoning company, delivering that seasoning mix, that a snack manufacturer is going to, put on top of their, snack. We are in sauces. We are, the products goes into beverages, and as well ice cream and yogurt. So yeah, um, there's I would say anchor flavors, like you were mentioning, they were vanilla and vanilla. So yes,
Yeah.
you have big flavors that make like the most important, I would say, part of the market in different categories. Like citrus, think about like lemon and oranges. For beverage, for instance, it's a big part of the market. So you are going to have those anchor flavors that are very important, but you are going to have new varieties and new flavors that appeal to people, because people always look for variety. That's the same when you think about music.
Yeah.
There's always new music coming up,
Yeah.
but then you have your like really very popular tunes and songs that we are still singing, and they have been launched in the 60s and the 70s or even the 50s. So that's the same thing with when it comes to flavors and taste.
What are some of the most popular flavors your company produces?
Oh, and that's so difficult to talk about because it's we have a very wide variety of flavors, and then
Yeah.
we produce and customize for whatever like the food or the beverage manufacturers wants to have. So it's not like we don't work based on the catalog. We really work with big companies, and we are customizing. So it could be vanilla, it could be strawberry, but it could be pumpkin spice. It could be lavender. It's rose. It really depends. It could be spices for sausages, for instance. So
Yeah.
it's very difficult to say which what are like the most important. I have to say that as a company, we want to make sure that we are vertically integrated and sustainable for all like the main category of flavors and seasonings. So if you think about culinary, it's the main important ingredients, which is the same in kitchen. It's like onion. Onion is the big thing because it is everywhere. It's a base for a lot of things. So we are vertically integrated, and we work very closely with a lot of onion producer out of Germany, where our headquarters is. But same thing with vanilla. Vanilla, 75% of the worldwide production of vanilla comes from Madagascar. And we are there. We have 200 people working in Madagascar, working with the farmers in order to make sure that we are supporting them, with their crop and so on. And the other piece is citrus. Citrus is, we need to be vertically integrated as well to make sure that we work with the growers to have the best quality in order to have the best extraction possible. Sorry, you asked me a question. I can talk forever about that topic.
No, no, I'm very interested in it. And I know our audience is too. I just think this is the best. Because I love this topic. So
Thank you.
now, so how much, because your company is really on the cutting edge. You're like the NASA of flavor. So like what impact do you think that innovation and exploration in flavor has an impact on our food tastes in America or abroad?
Um, I think this is critical to stay always. So that, I mean, there's two different aspects in your question. There is what we are doing to stay as a company always cutting edge, in order to bring like the best, taste experience to consumers. And
Yeah.
then there is as well the idea that we always want to explore and connect with people that are producing new interesting flavors that are, for me, like the chefs, the mixologists, the pastry chefs, because they are the forefront of of innovation when it comes to taste. So going back to like the first part, of the answer, we have hundreds and hundreds of food technologists and as well scientists and chemists that are really spending time to do research, to work on new techniques in order to make sure that we stay current and on, because everything is working so and changing so fast when it comes to technology, that we want to make sure that we are providing our customers, and then at the end of the day, you and all the consumers, with like the best solution that exists. So that's one element, and then the rest is, which is connected to my podcast, which is connected with the book, is the fact that in order to stay current about what's new, the best way is to connect with chefs, pastry chefs, and mixologists. And this is something that I really started when arriving in the country, and I decided to spend time looking beyond, I would say, like the fast food chains and what is easily available, that usually most of the tourists know about the food culture in America. But I really discover a lot of like interesting places and people that are bringing outstanding food, and as well creating and exploring new horizon when it comes to flavors.
You just touched on your podcast, and you started that in 2018,
Yeah.
and it's called Flavors Unknown. And this is a podcast where you talk to people in the food industry, and you really get into the conversations about the creative side of this industry. Now, you don't just talk to chefs and food writers, you're talking to people in all aspects. You're talking to mixologists, you're talking about farmers. Recently, you had an episode where you talked to the um, chef Michael Diaz de
Mm-hmm.
Leon
Yeah.
of Bruto,
Yeah.
and you talked about the children of immigrants and how
Sure.
immigrants feed this country, which is a very important topic. It's
Mm-hmm.
pretty weighty. Tell us a little about your podcast and how you got into it.
Okay. So um within like my responsibility of head of marketing for North America at Symrise, it was important for me to stay ahead of the curve when it comes to new ideas related to flavors. So I put together a unique sponsorship with a company called Star Chefs. And with that company, I started to participate to different events that they were having around the country. And during those events, I was moderating panel discussions, with, you know, 4, 5, 6 different culinary leaders. And I really liked those interactions. But it was really in the space of flavors and, what my company was focusing on. And at the end of each of those panel discussion, I was kind of frustrated because I wanted to continue the conversation beyond, the area of flavors. So in agreement with my company and as well with Star Chef, so I decided to launch this podcast in the fall of 2018, where I could have conversations with those culinary leaders that were acclaimed and awarded. And I wanted to understand their path to success. I wanted to understand their sources of inspiration, their creative process. And that was really like the main focus on the content of the podcast. So mainly they are chef, mixologists, and pastry chefs. But it happened as well that to open the door to other things, I had, yes, conversations with, people like, farmers, or I even talked to a person that was doing um, food tastings with involving cannabis. Early on, it was one of the first episodes that I had. So time to time, I'm bringing like a different perspective or a different aspect of the of what the profession around food could be, in the US. And recently you mentioned Michael Diaz de Leon
Yeah.
in Denver. It's because, yes, we had this conversation around the fact that a big part of what the culture of food in the US is today is connected to the history of immigration, and I thought it was like a very important aspect to cover. And I did it, in fact, in my book as well, on one of the chapter that I have.
This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and their work, please visit their website at www.chnorcal.org. That brings us to something you just touched on, your new book, Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door. Now, I really want to get to talk to you about this because I love the book and I'm very interested in your writing process in this because I really loved the way you wrote the book. I love the book, but
Thank
I
you.
loved your narrative structure, which I think is fantastic. So I'm not trying to gush or anything. I'm just like really excited about this because I really like what you did with it. I was really kind of engaged with the book. Now, this is a book where you use your connections with trending chefs, pastry chefs, and mixologists and farmers to write a behind the scenes look at the food industry, food culture, and also help us understand the creative process, which is very important to the book behind these individuals. So, were you inspired by the podcast or your work in the taste industry, or what kind of got you to write the book?
Sure. I think it started with a podcast, because you have a podcast as well. So,
Yeah.
which is interesting and very exciting for me is to be able to engage with people that are listening to the podcast. So I was able to do that through direct messaging, on Instagram, connected to the podcast. And I had
Yeah.
conversations, regular conversation with people listening. And for me, it was obvious that people were listening to 2 3 different episodes, because either they knew the guests or because they live in the city, where the guests and the restaurants, live. And for me, I was like, okay, how do I bring people to listen to more episodes, or how do I share really like this great content that were through, that happened through all my conversations with a larger audience. And you know chefs and pastry chefs and mixologists and so on, like and people that are really passionate about food buy books around food all the time. It could be cookbooks, but it could be as well other type of food memoir and so on. So
Yeah.
that's how it started, this idea. And then this just happened, I would say, a few months before the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, I had a lot of time on my hands. And I was not traveling, as much as I do, for work. So that's how I jump into the project, and starting, looking at through all the episodes and trying to find common threads and how I can structure potentially the book. So that's how the inspiration came to write it.
How did you decide what kind of style of book and what kind of voice you're going to have? Because I really love the style of writing that you use. It really makes me want to read more of what I want you to write more because I really liked it. It's a neat mix of linear narrative and viewpoint narrative, and I feel like it helps the reader get to understand and get engaged with the subject topics of each chapter. Was that a conscious decision for you, or did you just fall into it?
That's an excellent question. And in fact, there's different elements here. There are things that are connected with what I wanted to do, but there's as well advice from my agent. So, um, first for me, what I think was important is that I was not only giving content that were in only the podcast, because I'm saying people that are listening to the podcast, then why would they buy the book? They need to have more content.
Yeah.
That was for me something very specific. And some friends, when I was thinking about the structure of the books at the beginning, some friend mentioned, hey, why don't you structure the book having a chapter per guest? And I'm like, no, that's not really what I want to do. What I want to do is to have a chapter by big topics that came about like during my conversations. And so in terms of the style, I wanted to make sure that I was bringing in the book the voice of 50 plus, because I say there are 50, but there's probably 50, 55 that are selected, but all my guests. And then so that was the starting point. And then when I was engaged with an agent, when an agent decided that they liked the project and they wanted to represent me, then her advice was for me to put more about myself in the book, that I will use my experience of traveling, my experience where I'm coming from in France, my education through my family in terms of cooking, and as well my own viewpoints on those conversations, in the book. So that's probably why you see this kind of mix of my personal, I would say, narrative, and as well, those aspect coming from the conversations, with the with the culinary leaders.
I expected, I think when I got the book initially, I thought that it was going to be, like you said, just individual. I just
Mm-hmm.
assumed, I think, because we've seen this before. But instead, we got this wonderful, exciting little mini documentary with each chapter. And you could have almost encapsulated it and make a documentary with each one. And for example, I just want to talk about the chapter on farmers, foragers, and roadside riches. This is something that's near and dear to my heart. Can we talk about that a little bit? Because I thought that was a very exciting chapter.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's dear to my heart as well, which is access to quality ingredients, and as well to show that people can have, if they spend a little bit of time, discover things that sometimes are in the back of their, where they live, or they could be, not too far from where they live. And as well, when people travel, they can discover a really great ingredients. So that was a common point from all my discussion with those culinary leaders, is that in order for them to create the best dish, the best drink, the best dessert, it will start at the level of the ingredients. And access to quality ingredients is the most important part for them. So I had a lot of conversation to say, how do you find ingredients? How do you work with farmers or purveyors? What is your advice for food enthusiasts, people that are not, chefs and so on, to make sure that they can have access to great ingredients? And that's what I wanted to cover, in that chapter. And the idea of, as I said, at the beginning, is the fact that don't forget to explore. Spend the time, with the farmers market, talk to the people at the farmers market, create like a relationship, with them, because they are going to treat you well, with the great produce, or they can give you some pointers on how to cook their produce, or how to find, additional produce. So I love to travel, and for me, discovering new things in the different part of the country is a big passion of mine.
I could tell because, there's a touchstone chapter that I found to be very poignant, and it kind of almost like it reaches back and circles back to the podcast, and it touches other parts of the book too. It's the Mosaic of Cultures chapter. And I thought this was a really, this almost could have been a standalone book in many ways. What were you thinking when you wrote this chapter, and what were some of the experiences you had writing it?
Yeah, so the mosaic of culture is really this idea of people call it melting pots, and I like mosaic of culture better, and it's not something that I created or invented. It's been used by a lot of other people, but it was interesting is that the the culture and the style of cooking evolve in the country, and it is really driven by the influence of the sons and the daughters of immigrants, so either first generation or second generation. And I wanted to make sure that I capture that, because I had more than 15 guests on my podcasts that were either coming or have a heritage of Filipino, or Mexican, or Peruvian, or from a different background, or Japanese. And that was something critical for me when I structured the book, to make sure that I have one chapter dedicated to those men and women that make the style of food that we are having access to today. So it was important as well that I um, put a context in this book, and I was not writing something wrong. So I spent time doing research in the New York Public Library. I'm lucky that I live in New Jersey, not too far from Manhattan. So
Yeah.
I interacting with the researcher there, and they gave me access to great books to make sure that I was building kind of a context of the story, because a part of the story of food in the US is linked to the history of immigration.
You summed up the book in the chapter, The Kitchen as a Metaphor for Life, where you kind of broke the third wall and addressed the reader and talking about your experiences summed up the book. What did the book, writing the book, teach you, and what did you discover in your research?
Ah, that's yeah, that's the big thing. So I I, I was wondering, when you write a book or you write anything, is how do you end the book? So that was something important. And in fact, it happened doing this with one day I was going back from Manhattan to home with my younger son, and he's 24, and I was talking to him about, you know, being at the stage when I was writing the last chapter, and we brainstorm about how to end the book, and I give credit to him on the acknowledgement part because he helped me to figure that out. But yeah, I mean, I learned a lot of things about the food and how I approach food, thinking that I was talking about the access to high quality food. So for me, supporting farmers markets and local food business is really important. So I think I changed. I was doing it, but I think I'm doing it even more now. And then the fact as well, when I'm mentioning in the book, that people need to think about cooking within the season.
Yes.
And I'm the first guilty of this. Is I go to the supermarket, I have access to everything. I can get strawberries in January,
Yeah.
and or blueberry throughout the year. But in fact, talking to those chefs, they really explained to me that the peak of maturity of those ingredients, where they are the best in terms of delivering the optimum taste, is in season. So I think I spent more time thinking about this, and there's more about the learning about food, but I just wanted to highlight those 2 points. I think as an individual, something that is really a good learning is the fact that people need to think about, and myself as well, more about collaboration. I think that the new generation of chefs and culinary leaders today, um, we are going to see people like really collaborating, not only in between like chefs within the industry, but as well reaching out to other disciplines. It could be in art, or it could be in maybe mixologists and so on, and working together. So collaboration is key. And then I'm a manager and leader in the company where I work at. So I think that listening to all of those leaders in the field of restaurants or behind the bar, they could like really teach us some principle when it comes to leadership. So that's something that I've learned, thinking about like investing in people, thinking about I think finding mentors. If I had to go back in time, when I started working, I think that I would have loved to apply that advice, which is identifying mentors that can guide you and challenge you throughout your career. And I think this is something that chefs are doing pretty well.
Right now we're at a time when work on cooking and chefs and the food culture is very big on TV right now. And I felt a little guilty feeling this way, but I also thought this book really would do well to be a TV series. I could see this like doing the book itself would probably cover, I think, maybe one or two, three seasons, and it would be like really amazing. And it just really kind of almost lends itself to that. Have you been approached by any
No, but I maybe I
networks.
should take you as my agent.
Yeah, no, I'm enthusiastic. I would be a great agent. I think I would be out there
Thank
like,
you.
hey, dummies,
Yeah.
listen to this. This is a great book. This would be a great television series. Come on.
If you know anyone, let me know
Okay.
in the area.
Please tell me you're writing more books because I really love this one and I really would love to see more from you. I'm a little greedy that way, so please forgive
Oh,
me.
okay. So there's some ideas too. It's too soon to talk about it, but yes, I have some thoughts, maybe for a second book, but it will be a bit different. There will be still food, of course, related, and maybe in the world of chef. But let's see first. When I learn is when the success of the book is not only about the writing, it's as well about the promotion, which
Yeah.
what we are doing at the moment. So there's a lot of my I would say short-term future at the moment is on the promotion of the book, because the book is going to be out on November 8th. So there's a lot of things that is going to keep me busy between now the end of the year, beginning of next year. And then I think after that, I will maybe start to put some thoughts on, about like a second book. But yeah,
Excellent.
I have to say that it was my first experience. I didn't know what to expect, and I love the process. So I believe that I'm going to try to write a second one.
Are there any food readers that you, I'm sorry, I'll edit that out. Are there any food writers that you like to read that you enjoy yourself?
Ooh, that's a that's a good question.
It's a
And you know
tough
what?
one. I know. Sorry.
No, it's not a tough one, but I might want to send you like an email on this, because
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
getting old and I the memory of names.
Me,
I'm
I'm the
very
same
good at
way.
it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, definitely is when I was working on the book and thinking about how to structure the book, there is definitely a different books that I love and gave me some like inspiration. So yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of the book? Was there any part that you really enjoyed and thought stood out to you, among others?
Hmm.
Any
I
any part that makes you smile when you think about it?
I think the one that I really like the most is the time that I spent and with the research associated with it, like on the chapter of the mosaic of culture,
Yeah.
um, because it's as you said before yourself. I mean, it could be a book in itself,
Yes.
because that topic is so important. So yeah, I think that part was really good. I mean, very interesting for me to write and spend time on. And obviously, it's interesting because when I was writing the book, I had first readers. So when I had like a chapter more or less written, I was sending them to a few first readers to have their feedback. And people love the stories connected to my childhood or my time in France or in Europe, or some of my personal stories, here in the US. So I have to say that I have one story that I love here in the US, which is the one that I did with my younger son on going into the foraging and feasting trip. It was in Washington, D.C., with Chef Drew Adams. He's not there anymore. He's not at the Four Seasons in Washington, D.C., but
Yeah.
we have spent a whole day with him foraging, in Washington, D.C., near the Potomac River, and then doing a 18-course tasting menu at the Four Seasons, and it was only for me and my son, and that was something I will never ever forget. So that's so it is smiling, but it's smiling not haha, but it's smiling because it evoked like a very very pleasant whole day spent with the chef and my son, in kind of an unusual setting.
That sounds like fun. I love foraging myself. In fact, I am going to go get some rose hips today in a field that I've had my eye on that I think they're just ready now. So I'm going to go get them.
Very cool. What are you going to do with those rose hip then? A
I'm going to
tea?
make jelly out of them.
Oh, jelly.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. Sounds good.
Yeah. Emmanuel, I really want to thank you for being on the podcast. And I'm going to have links to your book and your podcast in the bio for listeners. And I encourage you to listen to the podcast and get the book. You're going to love both. Emmanuel, thank you for being on the program.
Dean, thank you very much for having me. Really.
That was my conversation with Emmanuel Laroche. His book, Conversations Behind the Kitchen Door, is singular, and I recommend you get it. You can get it all through distributors, through the link that I'm going to put in the bio, and you can also get it at all better bookstores. You're also going to want to listen to his wonderful podcast, Flavors Unknown. As I've said, it's a go-to for me. I listen to it weekly. I think you should too. It's all got very important stuff on it, really good topical stuff that you're going to want to listen to. Next week, we're going to have all I can say is archivist, for lack of a better term, Vicki Bennison, who's going to be on talking about her two cookbooks, the Pasta Grannies. One just came out recently, the second one, and the first one came out 2 years ago. She also has the YouTube channel Pasta Grannies as well. That is a kind of archival work where she interviews women in Italy and talks to them about cooking pasta and their lives. It's this wonderful work that, as I said in the interview, reminds me of the Foxfires book back in the 70s, where authors talk to people in Appalachia. I just thought this was fantastic work. You really should check it out, and listen to that episode then, with my interview with Vicki Bennison next week. I want to thank you for listening to the podcast. I always recommend that if people can go and recommend this to people online through social media, I really do appreciate it very much. We always like to have new listeners to the program, so please recommend it to a friend, post it on social media. This episode is sponsored by Culinary Historians of Northern California, a Bay Area educational group dedicated to the study of food, drink, and culture in human history. To learn more about this organization and its work, please visit its website at www.chnorcal.org. You really should check this out. If you're interested in culinary history, if this is your field of work, if it's something you're just interested in, check out the website. It's got a lot of good stuff on it. If you follow my podcast and enjoy it, you can go onto the link in the bio and buy me a coffee or a pint. If you like my work, you can drop me a line through there. Help us promote this podcast and share it with a friend, as I've said. And you can follow the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast on Spotify and get notified when new episodes are released. You can subscribe to the podcast newsletter and get updates when my articles come out at wellseasonedlibrarian.substack.com. The podcast theme song, Talk About Love, is sung by the band Kitty Cat Fan Club. Their label, Asian Man Records, has permitted its use. You can check them out and other bands and get the albums at Asian Man Records website, asianmanrecords.com. Check out all the other bands on that label as well. Buy a t-shirt, hoodie, bumper sticker, or an album, and you're going to be happier for it. I hope you all have a really good week, and I hope that you can cook up something really wonderful from maybe one of the guests we've had on the show. Keep on cooking.